are. You know already who we are. You said already good hello to us, and we say hello to you. And thanks for being with us in this set dedicated to the great Sidney Bechet. What a combination. First you listen to the music and the great musician Louis Armstrong. And what Louis Armstrong was on trumpet, certainly Sidney Bechet was on soprano sax, and to some extent also on clarinet. The music that we are going to play for you is not chronological. It's almost exclusively, with one or two exceptions, the music that Sidney Bechet composed when he was in France in the 1950s. It's highlight of his career. It shows in his music because it's full of warmth, love, excitement, and joy of playing this kind of music. Interestingly, these are all properties that you would not associate necessarily with Sidney Bechet, because he was not a very pleasant, enjoyable, good-hearted man. No, and he had lots of difficulties. The man had an absolutely short temper. But let's not go too deep in that. I will tell you a little bit of the history of the great Sidney Bechet, but we first go to do some music. Here's another tune from his French period. It has a title that is in Creole, which is almost like French, but completely misspelled, as the Francophiles would say. It's called Ce monsieur qui parle, the man who speaks. And I guess it's not too difficult to find out that that man is Sidney Bechet. Sidney Bechet was born in 1897 in New Orleans. He came from a middle-class Creole factory. That was not factory, family. Well, he had a lot of brothers and sisters, but I would not call that a factory. It was a family. And he got his first instrument. I think the first instrument he got was not a clarinet, but a trombone from his older brother. But very quickly he changed to clarinet at the age of 6. Interestingly, the same time that I started to play, but that was a few years later. By the time he was 11 years old, he was already playing professionally. And he ended up in some bands like the marching bands, like the Olympia brass bands. He played with the legendary Punk Johnson. He played with King Oliver. And this is as much as I'm giving you at the moment of the history. I will fill in some of the spots later on, so you don't get too much talking. I know the great adversity that you have against me talking, so As I told you, all the tunes, except one maybe, are composed by Sidney Bechet, and they were all from his period when he was in France. It's not unexpectedly that most of these tunes have a French title. The first two had a French title, well, one was Creole, one was French. Here's another French title. A tune that topped the charts when it was released. It was for more than 3 years the top tune on all the music boxes in Europe, especially in France, and also made it very popular in the United States. It was played so often that people got sick and tired of it. Nevertheless, it's a beautiful tune. I hope you enjoy our version of Petite Fleur. Well, when following his career, I wanted to realize that none of the tunes we've played so far he has played until in the 1950s, because that's when he composed them. And it would have been very difficult for him to play those tunes before he composed them. In 1919, when he was 20 years old, things in New Orleans were not going very well anymore. They had just closed the pleasure center, and there was almost no work for the musicians there anymore, so they all went up to Mississippi to places like Chicago. But Sidney Bechet went to New York. Things didn't go well for him. He was a kind of short-tempered figure that soon got to fight with all the band leaders he played with. And he had one property that stayed with him his whole life. If you would ever think about an A-character musician, that was Sidney Bechet. He, like Louis Armstrong, liked to take the lead and really didn't like anybody else to play better, faster, louder, or get in his way. With Louis Armstrong, it was a little bit easier. Not only was he a more adaptable and pleasant figure, with Sidney Bechet, he really wanted to play the lead and he wanted to be the main person. And it's one of the reasons that he didn't record very much with people like Louis Armstrong, because there is one wonderful recording with Louis Armstrong, but I think it's the only recording they've ever had, because for once they decided that they were going to accept each other, but only for once. So Sidney Bechet had the kind of a character that he didn't let anybody play first lead. So it got him in the way of all the jobs that were in New York. So he went to Europe, he went to London. And by that time, this was 1921, I think he went there. 1922, he saw for the first time a soprano saxophone in London. He acquired it, started playing it, and from that moment on it became his instrument of choice. It's not a curved soprano like I have. He played this straight one, and when you hear him play it, you can hear it from miles away, because he has this very special tone, this special vibrato, and as a side note to this, you can always hear, if you hear a French soprano sax or even clarinet player play this kind of music, they all sound like Sidney Bechet, except not as good. But they all have that same vibrato. Time for the next tune. Here's another French composition, also from his French time in the 1950s again. It's called Le Marchand des Poissons, and the correct title is, or the exact translation is The Fishmonger, the fish seller. However, the kind of circus, the circles that Sidney Bechet was in, they were much less interested in fish than something else they couldn't name by name, but he could smoke it. So Le Marchand des Poissons was selling smoked fish. Well, we left Sidney Bechet in 1922 with his new soprano saxophone in London. That's where he had his first brush with the police and the authorities. First love of Sidney Bechet was his music. The second of his love was women. And a number of times he got himself in trouble. Apparently, there was a fight that broke out in London about a woman. Sidney just proves that they're causing a lot of troubles to musicians all over the world. Anyway, he got arrested by the police and he was sent back to the United States. But not for long. But I will tell you about what happened in 1923 when we come back to Sidney Bechet. But first, we're going to play what I consider his most beautiful composition, one of those more really lyrical kind of songs, which is called Passport to Paradise by Sidney Bechet, 1950s. In 1923, Sidney Bechet went back to the United States. Actually, he probably didn't want to, but he had to. And then he started playing again with lots of music, and he had an association with Clarence Williams. Clarence Williams was a piano player, composer, mostly known as an arranger of music. But Clarence Williams composed a tune. So this is the only tune that we're going to play for you that is not written by Sidney Bechet, but it has Sidney Bechet written all over it, and it was probably written for him. It's called the Wild Cat Blues. Not an inappropriate description for Sidney Bechet. And typical Sidney Bechet style, he didn't allow any of the other musicians to take a solo in there, which is a little bit tough for me because I have to play the whole darn thing from beginning to end. Here is it's in 4 parts, and there are repeats, and there are key changes and things in there. Clarence Williams composition. Sidney Bechet recorded it many times. It was one of his favorite tunes. Here is the Wild Cat Blues. Well, shortly after that, 1925, he had a chance to go to France for the first time. And he hooked up with, what at that time was an incredible popular show. It was the Revue Maigre with Josephine Baker. And he stayed with that group for a long time. He had a rather wild and very well documented affair with Josephine Baker, but she wasn't the only one apparently, which Josephine didn't like, so there were some disagreements, like say at times. With this show they traveled all over Europe. He went to Russia, France, Germany, and everything went very well until he got himself into trouble again. What happened next? This story about it's a shooting thing. He got wounded himself and he shot somebody else. Well, didn't kill him, but it was serious enough that the police arrested him and sent him back to the United States. The reason for the fight, well, actually he spent jail first. I don't know, I didn't write down how many years, but he spent time in jail. The reason for the fight has been written down by a number of biographers, but it varies. The one I like best is that Sidney Bechet, according to another musician, played the wrong chord in one of the tunes. And it first was a slight disagreement, and then it got really heated. And Sidney Bechet has been known to say that Sidney Bechet doesn't play any wrong chords. Oh. Well, it was not the end of the argument. They ended up shooting. There are other versions of this, but I told you I think this one is the one I like best. Let's go and do another tune for you. This one. I get the jinx of this, but I'm not going to change my polka. This is one of the few songs that he wrote for clarinet when he was in France, but it also featured the drums. He must have gotten a soft streak in it by actually allowing another instrument to be featured. So this particular one features the great Charlie Castor, and it includes the whole band. So guys, wake up. The name of the tune is called Black Stick, and it's not French, it's English, Black Stick. Of course, referring to the chorus. Well, he's still in jail, but he's going back to the United States. It's now 1929, and he joins the band there, which is a well-known band from the time, big band, Noble Sissel. And he toured with the band actually in Germany and Russia, but not in France, at least not for a while. 1932, it's now the Depression area, and work is getting very difficult for all these musicians. He goes to New York, and goes on all these various jam sessions, recording sessions, but it's kind of doesn't work out for him very well, because his personality just doesn't fit the kind of camaraderie and kind of team play that is required in the bands and so on. So he sees that things are not working well, so he opens a tailor shop. He was a good tailor, and he actually, with his band leader, Tommy Ladnier, trumpet player, for many, many years they were having this tailor shop and having all the musicians, their uniforms were repaired, made, etc. And of course he played as many gigs as he could. But nevertheless, that was not very what he really wanted. And then at one time, he had a chance in 1950 to go back to Paris again. You know how the French are. Once you're punished, if you are good enough, you know, you can... why are you pointing to your husband? He did his punishment too and went back to Paris instead. I know he's from France, he's from Paris, but... Okay. 1950, there was a Paris jazz fair. And immediately, if they didn't know him from before, which they probably did, they got wild about Sidney Bechet. They loved his music, they loved the man. All of a sudden, facing all the discrimination that there was for black people in the United States, and all the trouble, especially if you were so outspoken as Sidney Bechet was. He was an American, played jazz, he was black, which was very interesting. He had a story, a background story that the French liked with, you know, shooting somebody and having sex with multiple partners and all these things. They loved him over there. So all of a sudden he decided to stay, and that's when he played his best music, all his great tunes that you've heard this afternoon. And he had a great time. He came back occasionally to the United States to do recordings. He did a lot of radio programs. Did make a lot of records actually also here, but every time he went back to Paris. In 1959, he died. Yeah, nobody was more sorry than Sidney Bechet himself. Lung cancer killed him. But his music lives on. All these recordings in France are on a record label that even up to date is not willing to release the copyrights. So all the music that we are playing for you is basically stolen and copied. Well, here is the last tune that we like to do for you, and again it exemplifies Sidney Bechet. His volumes, a loud saxophone, and I will try to play as loud as possible to approximate what he did, in a tune entitled Dans la rue d'Antibes, in the streets of Antibes. An hour has passed, and we have given you, I hope,